Welcome back to Monitoring Clinical Trials. My name is Steve Pope. This week we're going to be talking about Principal Investigator Oversight. So let's start with our purpose. This comes from the FDA Form 1572, Section 9, entitled Commitments. So when principal investigators agree to perform the duties listed in Section 9 of FDA Form 1572. These commitments are further listed in the FDA regulations found in 21 CFR 312, Investigational New Drug Application, and more specifically Subpart D, which is the responsibilities of sponsors and investigators. So one of the key things that you're going to do when you perform your monitoring visits is you're going to assess principal investigator oversight. So as I go through this lesson, think about ways that you would see that or ways that you would observe that while you're out monitoring at your sites. Our learning objectives are to discuss the importance of PI oversight, cite PI oversight responsibilities, identify misconduct, and prepare for audits. This would be sponsor audits, but it also would mean regulatory authority audits. So let's talk about the importance of PI oversight. First of all, the principal investigator, or the PI, is responsible for every activity that occurs at the clinical site. That means any activity that's performed by coordinators, or performed by pharmacists or lab technicians, anyone at the site that is working on the trial, their performance is the responsibility of the principal investigator. Although certain tasks and duties can be delegated to others, and in many cases they are, this responsibility ultimately remains with the PI. So up to this point, we've seen the regulatory binder, we've talked about training and qualifications, and this is where that oversight comes in. One of the objectives of monitoring is to ensure that the PI is performing proper oversight of site and study activities. So, PI oversight responsibilities, back to the 1572, by signing that document, the investigator agrees to conduct the study in accordance with the relevant and current protocol and will only make changes in the protocol after notifying the sponsor except when necessary to protect the safety, rights, or welfare of subjects. They also agree to personally conduct and supervise the described investigation. So this can take on a number of different flavors. That means supervising the individuals, but it also means that everything that goes on at that site is the responsibility of the investigator, no matter what it is. The investigator agrees to inform any patients or any persons used as controls that the drugs are being used for investigational purposes, and will ensure that the requirements related to obtaining informed consent that are discussed in 21 CFR Part 50 and Institutional Review Board review and approval in 21 CFR Part 56 are met. So that's very important. So they're responsible for ensuring that each subject is properly consented and that the proper IRB reviews are conducted and they have approval before they begin with any of the activities. They also agree to report to the sponsor adverse experiences that occur in the course of the investigation in accordance with 21 CFR 312.64, specifically Subpart D. And I have read and understand the information in the investigator's brochure, including the potential risks and side effects of the drug. The investigator agrees to ensure that all associates, colleagues, and employees assisting in the conduct of the studies are informed about their obligations in meeting the above commitments. And then finally, they're going to maintain adequate and accurate records in accordance with 21 CFR 312.62, and to make those records available for inspection in accordance with 21 CFR 312.68. So anytime that a monitor or an auditor or someone from the regulatory agency shows up at that site, the investigator is willing to make those records available for their inspection, for them to review while they're there. The investigator agrees to ensure that an IRB, an institutional review board, that complies with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 56 will be responsible for the initial and continuing review and approval of clinical investigation. And then they will promptly report to the IRB all changes in research activity and all unanticipated problems involving risks to human subjects or others. So where you may run into this when you're monitoring is there going to be certain cases where you may be dealing with a local IRB, or in some other sites may be dealing with central IRBs, but the essence is that they are different IRBs, and so many of them will have different reporting requirements. So when it comes into play, things such as reporting adverse events or serious adverse events or protocol deviations, it's important to understand what that site's IRB requires from the investigator or from the site as far as those reporting requirements. So that's usually something you're going to need to discuss with the coordinator and maybe clarify with the IRB what their reporting requirements are. The investigator agrees to not make any changes in the research without IRB approval, except where necessary to eliminate apparent immediate hazards to human subjects. You're probably not going to run into this very often. In many cases, most of the deviations that you're going to discover are going to be deviations that were not reported prior to the activity to an IRB or to the sponsor. So they're going to be deviations that need to be reported to the IRB. So usually you're going to see errors and omissions in this area, not so much where they deviated from the protocol. And then investigators agree to comply with all requirements regarding the obligations of clinical investigators and all other pertinent requirements that are in 21 CFR Part 312. We can't talk about principal investigator oversight without talking about scientific misconduct. And it's important that we understand how to identify misconduct. Not that you're going to discover that very often. You really won't. But we need to be aware of that. And those of you that have taken my previous course have already had a pretty good dose of this information. So we want to, first of all, identify what misconduct is. So one of the areas of misconduct is fraud. And that's going to be an intentional deception made for personal gain. An example of this might be intentionally falsifying or fabricating research data or misleading the reporting of results. We saw this in some of the other instances that we've studied earlier. So it's important that fraud is intentional, an intentional deception. We may see just plain ordinary misconduct that may not be intentional. It will probably include a failure to follow established protocol if the failure causes harm to the patients or to the study subjects. So the categories of misconduct that we want to talk about include fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, and ghostwriting. So fabrication is basically going to be making up experiments, making up data, just creating it when it doesn't exist. Falsification could be changing the results of data without statistical justification. That could include, intentionally, falsifying data results, maybe to keep a subject in a study. You may run into that occasionally. Sites get paid a lot of money per subject to conduct research, so it's very important. They're very eager to keep the patients involved in the subject or study, specifically if it's a long study. So this is something you want to be paying attention to. Plagiarism, appropriating the words or ideas of another and presenting them as one's own. You probably aren't going to run into too much of that as a monitor. And then finally, ghostwriting, authoring papers for others. Once again, probably not going to run into that very often in your monitoring role, but we need to be aware of that, because if we discover that PIs may have done that in the past, it might lead to other types of misconduct, so we need to be aware of it. So more importantly, as a monitor in identifying misconduct or recognizing it, we want to talk about a few signs to look for in the clinical data. For example, this would be when you're reviewing the subject source or you're reviewing information, data that's in the clinical database, things such as perfect visit attendance. That would be very unusual if a site has 15 or 20 subjects and they've all got perfect visit attendance. Duplicate data, lab results, etc. So when you see lab results, make sure that the proper subject ID is on that lab result. 100% drug compliance. That's one that is very easy to recognize. In most cases, not every subject is going to be 100% compliant on taking their study drug. So when you see that, that might be something you would want to question with the site if that is indeed the case. No adverse events reported and no ConMeds reported. You may run into that sometimes. Sometimes you may run into sites that aren't aware that they have to report every single change in a person's medical baseline. If they've had diarrhea, if they've had, a headache, or if they've had, if they got some poison ivy or something like that, they may think it's not really related to the study, and it may or may not be, but they need to report that as an adverse event. So when you go places and you don't see many adverse events reported, that's a clear sign. You need to question the PI, just ask them to describe for you how they probe for those adverse events, because that can be something that can be a real compliance issue down the line. And then lastly, they've had very few withdrawals. Most studies, especially ones that last a little while, say up to a year or so, they're going to have withdrawals. They're going to have early terminations. So when you see where they've got a large number of subjects that have been involved in the study for a long period of time and they've had no withdrawals, that's kind of a clear sign that we need to kind of probe that a little bit and make sure we understand, what's going on there. So let's talk for a moment about audits. Now I'll break this down in that you can have sponsor audits where the sponsor of the trial, the pharma company, is going out and auditing sites. Or you may have regulatory audits where the regulatory agent is coming out and monitoring the sites. On a limited basis, you may have even IRB audits where someone from an IRB wants to come out and audit a site. So one of the roles that you have as a monitor is to help your site be prepared for audits of any kind at any point. So if we look back at the guidelines, so section 5.1.19.1, purpose, the purpose of a sponsor's audit, which is independent of and separate of routine monitoring or quality control functions, should be to evaluate trial conduct and compliance with the protocol, SOPs, good clinical practice, and the applicable regulatory requirements. So you as a monitor can help prepare your sites for these audits by performing good monitoring activities. That's one of the reasons why at each visit we want to go through the regulatory binder, make sure nothing is missing. We want to make sure that clinical supplies are adequate. We want to make sure that all consents have been reviewed, that we haven't left anything behind. So by performing your job as an auditor and making sure that everything is in order at that site, you can really assist that site do well in an audit. So that's very important. Sponsors are going to send auditors out to the clinical sites, and they're going to be there to review the site's records. So what are they going to be reviewing? They're going to take a look at the investigator site file or the regulatory binder. They're going to discover if documents are missing, what should be there versus what is there. They're going to look at subject source data documentation. They may review one or two subjects and make sure that the site is performing all of the tasks, all the procedures they're supposed to do for each visit. They're going to monitor drug and IP records. They're going to count the number of boxes of IP they've got, match that to the IP accountability logs. They're going to look at facilities. They're going to look at equipment records. Has it been calibrated? When was the last time it was calibrated? Things like that. They're going to look at study supplies. Do they have an adequate amount of study supplies to continue to conduct the study? They're going to look at protocol compliance. What kind of deviations have they had? Were there deviations that they discovered, that the auditor discovered, that were missed in the monitoring visits? Those are things they're going to look at. So this is what you have to be prepared for, and you have to prepare your sites for, so they'll be ready for these audits. So the auditors, they should discuss their audit findings with the PI after the audit, and then a written report of the audit will be provided to the sponsor. So a lot of times what will happen, you'll have personnel that work for the sponsor company. They'll come out and do audits, and they'll write up a report, and you'll learn as a CRA, as the monitor, you'll learn what the findings were, because you're probably going to need to talk about those with the site. But a lot of times sponsors will hire outside independent auditors to come audit sites, and so you may see the report that was written by those people. So they should be able to reveal to the PI, once they conclude their audit, while they're still there, what the findings were that they discovered. And then, as a matter of practice, regulatory authorities normally do not request sponsor audit reports. So if somebody from the sponsor goes out and audits the site doesn't actually receive the report. They will receive information on what the findings are. But when regulatory authorities go out, any reports or any letters that might be reflective of an audit, they should not be asking for those, and sites are pretty attuned to that requirement, so they should be well aware of that. So to augment what we've learned in this lecture, we have a couple of reading assignments. In your CRA's Guide to Monitoring Clinical Research, we have Chapter 18, Quality Management, Chapter 19, Audits, and then Chapter 20, Errors, Misconduct, and Fraud. Also, I've posted a couple of articles on Moodle for you. Ensuring the PI maintains appropriate oversight of and involvement in a clinical trial. That's a CenterWatch article. Also, FDA warning letters and Form 483, what's the difference? That's a short little article that explains the difference between those two documents. And then finally, you've got an online article entitled A Successful Study of Principal Investigator's Perspective. So these reading assignments will help reinforce what I've gone over in this lecture and help you learn a little bit more about principal investigator oversight. So for your online assignment for this week, what we're going to do is we're going to search the FDA website for warning letters involving PI oversight of clinical trials and site conduct of the trial. So I've listed the website right there, and that's also in the module page that's on Moodle, so you can just easily click the link and get to it. So once you pull up that link, in the topics section on this page, I want you to choose ways to view and browse warning letters. You'll see that when you pull it up. And then in the search field, search on a term such as consent or accountability or oversight as an example. And then from this list, choose a letter to an investigator that's going to show up in the subject column, and then find a letter that interests you. The letters usually are a couple pages long. I don't suggest you read the whole letter, but find one that may be on a topic or a study that's in a therapeutic area that you might have some interest in. And then I want you to answer the following questions once you pull up that letter. So what you're going to do, you're going to describe the violation listed in the letter, and then what could the study monitor do to help the site avoid this finding, and then finally, what does the FDA require the PI to do? So that information is going to be listed in the letter. So it's going to describe what the violation is, and it's going to describe what the FDA describes for the PI to do or require them to do. So that second question, what could you do as a study monitor to help the site avoid this finding? That's where you're going to kick in your monitoring knowledge and experience and identify maybe things that you could have done to help them avoid that finding. So if you have any difficulty, let me know, but go ahead and just post your responses to those questions on the discussion forum. Go ahead and post the link to the letter itself so that I can see which one you looked at. You should be able to just post that inside your discussion forum response. And I'll see you guys out there, and let me know if you have questions.